Mitchell Stankovic Associates and the Underground Ideas into Action presents The Underground Chats, authentic conversations with credit union thought leaders. Today's chat, Reshaping the Workplace, with Cheryl Middleton, Chief People Officer of COOP Financial Services.
Cheryl, welcome to the Underground Chat. It's so nice to see you.
It is lovely to see you too, Sue. Good to see you. Good to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. How are you, your family, your credit union family, co-op? How's everybody doing?
We are doing well. I think immediate family is okay, but I think we're all impacted by COVID, and whether that is my co-op family as well as my immediate family. And so I think I speak for a lot of people when I express it's just going to be good to be able to move through this and get to the other side, because it's just it's a tough time right now, I think, for everyone that has been impacted.
Yeah, and I'm finding that in some ways we had really high hopes that, like, new year, new progress. Everybody was pretty excited, and I think that the reality that we're still in the situation we're in is maybe even tougher to take. So, how did you guys navigate it in 2020, and what kind of changes did you see with co-op and your clients and your?
Yeah, I think the good news is I believe that we were all kind of changing together in terms of how we operated. We moved to an 80% work from home model, 80% work from home, essential workers, 20% in office. We finished that back in April of last year. And so even within in the office population, we moved to kind of decentralized pods so that we could really protect our workforce and hopefully minimize any impact to COVID, or minimize as much as possible the impact of COVID on our operations. And I think when you look at our credit union clients, a lot of them were doing the same things, moving to closing their branches, at least for a period of time. And, I think everyone was in the same boat. And we're still in that 80-20 model, but now we're starting to look ahead to, what will it look like when we work, when we transition from that model back into something else. Once you stretch a rubber band, it doesn't go back to the same shape. And so now that we've kind of seen how we can be productive in this model, I think it's a good opportunity to sit back and ask what worked, what isn't working so well, and what do we want to learn from this so that we can apply it to how we operate in the future. And that is going to be a lot of what we spend, the next 6 months doing, is thinking about what that means to our future, our footprint, and so forth.
I think that rubber band analogy you just used, it's such a strong visual. The idea that things are reshaping, and we've heard all the terms, and we've talked about pivoting, we've talked about responding, we've talked about, in our case, shift happens. But the idea of
I like that.
I know, I just have some fun with that. But the idea that the rubber band has permanently shifted shape applies to so many different areas, and your point that it's not going to go back, I think, is a very important one. I was so excited to hear about your engagement of within, the vote, and getting out the vote and being part of solutions. And I think that maybe that's another way of us looking at how the rubber band has changed things as we go forward. I mean, tell us a little bit about your journey over the last, in Georgia, over the last year or the last 6 months.
Well, this is more on a personal note. I think within Georgia, it was unique because I moved to the Georgia area in 2018. And so I moved from Tennessee to Georgia, and coming to Atlanta at a time where there was a presidential election as well as then a Senate race that impacted the shape and the look of the Congress was really just kind of a good time to be here in terms of if you have an interest in, political activism, this is your time. And I will say all the ads and all the mail folders or mail things in the mailbox, it was a lot, over what felt like a really long period. But one of the things I believe is that democracy is a team sport, and we all have some place to play in it. And, I was part of, encouraging voter registration by phone. And I think, I like doing that, and I always have. But it's interesting because my kids are old enough now to, see me doing these things, and part of them was like, boy, you must like getting hung up on a lot. You like rejection, and so it's kind of like, yeah, no, not really. That's not the fun part. You got to call about 30 people, and, 1 out of 30 you might actually have a conversation with, and 29 people may hang up on you, but the idea is that you're moving forward. And it makes me feel good to not just be a part of, helping to participate in the process, but hopefully showing my girls that that's what's expected. And I want them to have something to do with shaping the world that they live in.
Interesting that we have been taught different value systems, but in my case, my mother was very much a proponent of education regarding the Constitution. And on an annual basis, September 17th is Constitution Day. And so our family would do, our family would actually, 17th, 19th, now I'm going to have to look at, but we have a display at the library, and Mom carefully every year brought more materials so that we could put this huge display up, and the kids and the people in the library could read and see all of the legal documents. And so every year when I'd go to DC, I'd bring back something new for her that would help tell the story of the Constitution. So from generation to generation, my mom did it, then I've done it, then my daughter and my son have put it up, and now my grandchildren actually go with me, and they've helped put the display up, and then they look at the documents, and then we talk about the Constitution. So each of us in our own way, have some type of commitment to democracy in the way we live. And so I was excited to hear you share that story with me before, because no matter really our political leanings, it really comes down to being actively engaged and grateful for what we have in the United States. So it's a pretty big deal. Yeah.
It is a big deal. And thank you for sharing your story. I just, again, I think, we are role models, and we want to keep that status, and participation in the process is critical to making sure that we do.
So we're facing a new year. Here we are, 2021. Oh, and, I was thinking about the fact that 2020 was like a new decade. We all had kind of high hopes last year when the year started. And then, when all is said and done, we survived. And I think we continue to serve people. And if anything, we're more cognizant of how important it is, the credit union's role in serving people. So what are some of the key initiatives that you have and that Co-op has for 2021?
I touched on one earlier, I think, and this is kind of a broad, co-op effort. And this is really thinking about how do we shift now that we had this, pandemic that we lived through, that we navigated through, that we had to figure out how we work, what does that look like for us, and how does that shape work in the future? I think that's a really critical question, and I think most companies are trying to wrestle with that now, and we're no exemption from that. We're doing the same thing, and I think it's part of the broader goal of being that company that we want everyone to want to work for. When I have a vision of what I want for Co-op, it really is about being that employer that everyone wants to work for, because we do good work on behalf of our clients and our members. And we also, from a purpose standpoint, want people to make an impact the best way they can on the world while they're here at Co-op. So, within our ecosystem of Co-op, we want to make work easier. We want to make sure that people are involved in that process and that they are getting their needs for growth and development fulfilled as well. So, higher purpose, we want to be that employer of choice. And I think that really is the vision that we have for where we want to be with respect to people wanting to work at Co-op. I want them to beat down the doors, and those are the people that, I think that will thrive in our environment. And so that's, really what I'm looking forward to, not just for 2021, but, in subsequent years as well.
It's fabulous. And I was thinking about how those positions, I was reading an article, I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, talking about how jobs are changing and the type of skills that we're going to need going forward. So when you think about that with the Co-op, I mean, you serve credit unions throughout the United States, so your workforce is very distributed as well. Even before this, right? People were out in the field. And so how does that social distancing and the virtual work, and then now vaccines, how are all those things going to come together in 2021? Are you putting a plan together, or are you going to be addressing it as you go? Because it's really hard to anticipate.
We're doing our best, with respect to vaccines alone, here it is, it's January, and the supply for vaccines right now isn't where we want it to be. But, knowing that there are a couple more vaccines that are up for FDA approval, we hope within the, next month, I hope the landscape shifts over the next couple of months so we have more of a supply so that we can help especially our essential workers and all employees easily become vaccinated if they choose. So hopefully that will be a big effort that we're able to help facilitate in the first part of the year. I think, then, thinking about Co-op and, where we land with all of this, again, to the employer of choice, we want to make sure that we are capitalizing on the things that have worked well for us in 2020, like getting used to WebExes, and managing how we are still able to stay connected even though we're far away. I don't think that's going to change depending on, what happens in the future. I think WebEx technology is always going to be with us, and we may not travel as much as we used to meet in person, but I do think what's going to be different is, kind of having some intention and purpose when we do get together, so that, if we are still in this remote working model throughout 2021, say the first 6 months or so, when we are able to get together, how do we do that and make sure that we are capitalizing on our need to work, but also our social needs, and thinking about how we get together. One thing that I was talking about with my team, we were talking about onboarding new people. And there are a lot of people we brought on board in 2020 that have never met anybody outside of Co-op. When you think about it, those folks that were hired in April and after got a laptop and full setup at their desk, and this is what they know. So there's a really good opportunity for us to, help people that are newer to our company feel like they are part of the company and start to build those relationships that certainly you get over time, but are accelerated when you're intentional about bringing people together. So I think we have some work to do to really kind of help drive that. But I'm excited about, the future. Like you said earlier, we were all looking forward to 2021 and, it's going to be so much different than 2020. Well, maybe, but I think now we know what's in store and we are better able to react and respond and adjust. So I do think 2021 will be a lot better.
And
I hope so.
You made a couple of points that to me I really want to follow up on. The idea that we started to make the virtual engagement more intimate and we used it in a different way. I think that was an evolution. Instead of it just being a reaction that we had to, okay, we've got to figure something out. I saw how your company responded and how you evolved your communication so that it became stronger. I'm fascinated with the onboarding, the orientations, because when we worked on multimedia, we did a lot of employee orientations. And one of the things that we found was that when people come into a workplace at the same time, a year later, they'll come back to an event and they'll gravitate to the same table. So they'll remember the people that they onboarded with, right? And I think with this virtual environment, I wonder if we're establishing those same connections. It's just a thought.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I don't think anything takes the place of those connections that you meet, especially your first day, and even if it's done virtually, it's still, there's still something to be said for, those in-person interactions, because you lower the waterline and probably talk a little more on a personal level than just work, right? I think you're right on with the question of how do we replicate that, or how do we do our best to compensate for that in a virtual environment? I think that is really the opportunity that we have.
Well, you also brought up something that I think that we're wrestling with as a country when it comes to vaccinations and masks and all those things, is with your workforce spread out like it is, you're dealing with not only federal rules, but you're dealing with individual states, individual counties, and how do you do that enforcement? And with your scope of really managing all of the people of co-op, which then affects all of your credit unions and their members, have you had to be you had to be probably resilient and flexible in how you applied the rules? How has that all evolved?
Well, I'll give you an example, and the best example I can think of might be just reaction to COVID. As every state was impacted differently, and there are different requirements in different counties. And so we work hard to make sure that we understand the legal requirements everywhere we operate. And so where we know that there are mandates or requirements for different types of behavior changes in how we operate, we message and communicate those changes to the groups that are impacted. So LA County, in California, California in particular, was aggressive initially in 2020. And so our communications directed to our Rancho-based employees was specific to the requirements of being in California. And so we've had to be more knowledgeable about those regulations, whether they're state, whether they're county, and we've had to make sure that we are on top of any changes that occur. So we work with our legal partners. We work to make sure that we're abreast of what's changing by way of, participation in various white papers and that type of thing. So it really is an ongoing educational process for us too.
And I thank you very much for going into a couple of these subjects, because I'm just fascinated with the scope of what you do from a human people perspective. So we're not only dealing with these different ground rules, if you will, when it comes to physical health, we're also dealing with, I think, a revolution of sorts when it comes to DEI and some new laws that are coming out regarding gender balance, and I know the state of California taking some action there. Any observations in that area? Are you approaching it in the same way that you mentioned, just researching and seeing what you need to do and being progressive?
We research, and we try to bring in expertise, and we launched our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council last February, in fact, and they have been amazing in terms of helping us think through everything from our employee handbook and the use of pronouns, all the way to really kind of who we want to be in terms of a company, and how are we making sure that we are tapping into our networks. It's been an evolution, but I think in terms of education education, awareness, and programming, we are doing our best to make sure that we are offering an inclusive work environment that ultimately supports our goal of being that employer of choice. So a lot of really good work that I think our council is doing and continues to do to make sure that we are staying on top and being the employer we want to be.
I think what you just said is absolutely, bar none, a very profound statement, because what you said was you're doing all of these different, initiatives really back to your core business purpose, which is employer choice. And, being able to have a diverse workforce, thought process, to be able to, adjust to the implications of different environments and different zip codes. And, I just love the idea that the integration of what I think are social purpose and ideas that we really have to push for progress can be integrated into the business. Right. And the business then it gets the recognition, if you will, from having these initiatives. That, by the way, is one of the reasons why Co-op is such a profound partner of ours. I believe that the way that you said, hey, we started in February, it wasn't a reaction to an event necessarily and the horrific events that happened in 2020, but the idea that it was a core principle of your organization. So,
I love what you just said, and I appreciate that. What I would also say is, I don't know if I'm saying this the best possible way, but 2020 was really a year of just tremendous change, from the pandemic to, really a movement around racial equity and justice, and we leveraged our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. We also leveraged our internal culture crew, which is a group of employees that is chartered to really help us identify those opportunities that we have to impact our culture positively. And so, through those organizations, through those employee-driven groups, we were able to meet the moment. I think my learning for last year was really that we as Co-op had an opportunity to, appreciate how outside events impact us internally. Sometimes we like to think that, there are very thick boundaries between what happens at work and what happens on the outside. But something about working remotely and having those boundaries start to become more porous. It also applies when it comes to the life outside of work and how that impacts us internally. And I think the learning is to embrace that as well and to think about, how do we talk to employees about what's happening in the world and what we believe as Co-op. And I think our CEO, Todd Clark, has done a wonderful job of really stating that. Todd does Todd Talks once a week, and it's a video clip. It might be 5 minutes, but he talks about, what's top of mind for him, whether it's recognition of what's going on in the business, whether it's employee recognition, whether it's just awareness and update and his thoughts. We talked about voting and being active in democracy. One of his initial comments in one of the Todd Talks was, I don't care what you vote or, your affiliation, but make sure you do vote, and so employees are hearing that from the CEO. And I think that too makes an impact on how they view what is happening inside Co-op as well as outside. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well.
Hey everyone, Todd here from the special room. One more week. Glad to be back at it. I took a couple of weeks of vacation, and then we had an all-staff meeting, so we've been a little lax in this, but time to pick it back up. Speaking of staff meeting, I want to thank everybody who attended. I think we had over half the company attend in person, and then many more have now watched it online, and that was great. We had several questions that we weren't able to get to, and that's not surprising since this is a strange time and we're all at home, or a lot of us are at home. So I wanted to see if I could address some of those questions in the video. So you'll excuse me if my eyes divert over to read the questions, because I can't memorize questions very well, and some of them are pretty detailed. So I want to read those questions and then give you the answers as transparently as I can.
Woohoo! Todd Talks. I love that.
I mean, I don't know if it's an official brand. I think of it.
That's very clever, and it's really a connection too. It's demonstrating his connection to the people, and so it's really part of your culture. And I'll put a little note to myself on that because I'm hoping to talk to him with another undergrad chat soon. And so I just I love it. Okay,
We can do a Todd talk if you'd like.
Yeah,
If you'd like, I'd be happy to send one your way.
All right, I would love that. I would love to have a clip. That'd be fabulous. Okay, so 2 ideas in action. What would you like our listeners and the people in our world to be thinking about today?
I think going back to, just today is a historic day. We're talking on Inauguration Day, which, is just, it's wonderful every 4 years to see democracy in action. And I think going back to something that we said earlier, this is probably bigger than, co-op and the credit union movement. It really is all about understanding, the world outside of us and, how we're perceived. That applies to us every day at work. Understanding, what is happening in the world and what's our role in, kind of shaping how we view that and making sure that we are meeting the moment. I think that's imperative for all of us, no matter where you work. And again, that's my learning from last year. And I think just the other thing is really just how that positively impacts your culture. I think, when I hear from employees, they actually like to hear what leadership thinks about certain things. And, they want to hear more about, views from leadership like Todd. And I think meeting the moment has helped to really kind of drive that engagement, which is really what we want. So meet the moment.
That's great. And I do believe that you represent, your whole organization at this point represents the future within the cooperative movement. One of the strongest CUSOs, obviously, for all credit unions. So what you have to say matters. And I think that on a grander scale, as well as to each individual. So I thank you for that. Thank you very, very much for your time today. And I'm so excited. We'll get back to you and we'll give you all the details. All right. Any questions or anything?
No, it's been a pleasure, as always, talking to you, Sue.